Cool. Hello, world. Another week of Naiji Temple. This is Naiji Coach.
This is Naiji Ben.
And this is Naiji Glenn.
Perfect. So, got a small temple tonight. That's kind of cool. I actually am not at the coffee shop myself because it is raining crazy out there. So, it's a dark and stormy night. It's a good time to kind of hole up with a few good friends. All right. So tonight we have something fun to discuss, which is a case that was put forward by a person who we won't name, but they have been corresponding with Podlair for a while via email on a very kind of sporadic basis. And they want to know things about the theory, but particularly related to their life, and they consistently do not wish to have their mojo read. So this person actually specifically asked that their mojo, we not request them to read their mojo again. So I won't bother. The person already knows the reasoning for that, and we made our arguments on that. They can do what they want. But now I'm just going to move past that and deal with the situation of when a person presents things in this way, because they're going to ask a question, which is an interesting topic, but there could be some confusion because of who asked it. Okay, so basically here's the short version of it. This person is asking about another person that they're interested in who they believe to be a Naiji, and the person asking the question also believes himself to be a Naiji. This is in no way confirmed. The person is not giving us what we need to make that confirmation, and statistical probability, they're probably, in this case, not a Naiji, although they could be anything. You need video to confirm. Okay, so then they're asking what they say is a very, very, very important question. That's how they phrase it. Very, 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 very important question, which is to ask about the interactions between two Naiji. We will get to that question and compare that to how two Nijez, a Naiji and a Nijai, actually relate to one another. But in this case, we want to talk first about how Naiji handle cases, because this is basically a case being put forward. Okay, so what we were talking about before we went on air is that when any Nai hero, particularly Nai Alpha, are presented with cases by people or the system, there's often the scene where they won't yet touch the case, which may seem yin, but it's not. It's a very yin way of being yang. Is they'll ask, why is the folder missing certain things? Why is the file in a certain package? Why did a certain person deliver the file or case file to be worked on rather than someone else? Why was that done in a cafeteria rather than the office? All kinds of deductive reasoning questions. That's very important to do, because a lot of times what really is needed to solve the case can be found in those missing things. Because as a detective, you have to constellate what's going on. Often you see detectives putting things on a board, and it's Nai's ability to put more pieces on the board, unthought of pieces, abductively reasoned pieces that lets them solve cases others couldn't. Okay. So, as an IG, something we'll always be doing with in any casework is bringing the Nai, abductive reasoning, and its ways, the way it works, and the G code of conduct. So here in this case, there's two things going on before we get to the question they're asking about. The first is that they're asking for us to solve a case without giving us the given that equation requires to get. And if we skip past that, then all the data we're giving, if it's in any way perceived, this is what has to be corrected. G will be required here. We're correcting this, saying we're going to answer that question in the conceptual abstract, but the person that elicited the question should in no way take it, and this is critical for our the way we're delivering this medicine to this person. In no way should it be taken as we're saying this applies to your case. We're answering the question because you brought it up. But it must be stated that our answer to your question about your case does not apply to your case. It does apply to the conceptual abstract. That's a fine shade. It's a nuanced way of doing it, but that's actually correct. And again, this is where Naiji excel. Okay, then we get to the G, which is the stating that it's a very, very, very important question. But how important is it? Because it was said in general, so it can be taken two ways. Important to the world or important to the person asking the question. As far as being important to the world, no, it's not. As far as the G ranking goes, there's a lot more important things that the Podlair staff is doing with their unprecedented and extremely rare gifts right now that are more important. So in a general sense, no, it's not. Then specifically for the person asking the question, it must not be that important because they're not willing to go on camera for a few moments unlisted. They don't have to actually do it ever again. They can take down right away afterwards in order to get the information they need about this apparently important relationship or important situation regarding this relationship. Okay, so those kind of things need to be stated. Now I'll kind of turn it over to you guys. We can kind of chat about it a bit, and then whenever we're ready, we can move on to the conversational topic, which is what's going on with Naiji or with Naiji as opposed to Naiji with Nijai. What's the pros and cons, and how does it work? We'll get into that. It's kind of fascinating, and it does relate also to something Mitchell brought up about he felt the need to kind of sound off and get validated. And what that was an instinctive reach out to his other, to go all the way down to Z and Vi and give like recognition on the record books that you had in fact done heroic feats. And that is something that, for example, Nijai can only do, and inspirational for Naiji, and no other Mojo can do it like that. Okay, so now let's talk about the case. So you guys have had a little debriefing on the case. Go ahead, give your thoughts on this case, and then we'll kind of get into it. I love doing cases. This is great, guys.
Okay. So, have we gotten past the lack of a given yet, or are we still talking about that?
We can. Yeah, we can talk about that. So we basically kind of constellated several factors in this case, which is sort of the thing the person wants us to talk about, which is that double Naiji versus a Nijez couple, and then there's the fact that there's not the given for their case, and the fact they presented this case incorrectly. But we're badasses, so we're still going to solve this case in the conceptual abstract. But those two things also are on the board and need to be mentioned. Otherwise, we would, as Naiji, would not be solved this correctly. Abductive reasoning, we would not have pieces on the board that may be confusing or this person may not want to hear. A lot of times, Nai is confusing and controversial. Irregardless, it needs to go on the board because if not, it's not being done correctly. And then the G as well. Because if you ever operate when your G is not doing code of conduct just because you don't understand or because you're letting it go for whatever reason, then you're not going to be operating at your peak capacity. What happens is people ask you to do casework, you basically take their demons onto you. Yeah. And now you're dealing with them, you're solving the case. So you need to deal with that with them. Sometimes Naiji deal with other people's demons. In fact, we're the best at it in a certain kind of way, the Jez hunters. But you know how you deal with demons? You recognize them before you have further interaction. Like if I actually am like talking to a person about like how to save their daughter, like okay, but then when they do it, I see some like demonic apparition come out. Like okay, before we get into specifics of your daughter, let's talk about that.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room here. Or
so I'm not sure you're ready to be with your daughter just yet,
exactly.
Right?
There's a good chance, right? Yeah. Exactly. There's a good chance you're the problem.
Yeah, it's like no, it's not me. It's this thing here. It's like,
yes.
Hold on. I'm looking at the story, and it looks like.
Well, I mean, and your strengths that might actually be, but there's a bigger issue to talk about oftentimes.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
I mean, you know.
Yeah, sometimes you can't.
Before we get into specifics of your case, there's a bigger issue that needs to be addressed. That's like Nai 101.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're saying, Glenn?
Yeah, it's just like before we can actually like start, because the person, they'll present the case in a certain way, but actually they'll present it in a way ignoring their own kind of position in the story, and actually the reason why the story is happening the way it is because of what's going on with them. And so that needs to be addressed in order to solve the entire case overall that they actually want, but they kind of got like a messed up perspective of what's the issue. So what I wanted to say about this person is that for them to say that they don't want to actually publish a video, it seems very arrogant in a way. It's kind of like you need to have a certain. It's not like we want a person to make a video just for the sake of them making a video, like It's something that we actually need in order for things to happen the way that they need to. If there was another way, then we would have done it that way.
There's a very specific procedure, and
So wait a minute. Why are we answering this person's question if they aren't going to benefit from this conversation?
That's what I'm saying.
Because the question is. I think
that's an incredibly good question. In fact, that question is basically the one I asked, and which brought me to where I am now talking to you all.
Mm-hmm.
The answer in the simplest terms is you can always learn from any case if there is some reason to work on it and you're badass enough. Okay. There is a reason for us to work on it because the question's about
the stuff. The question. It's a good question.
It's a good exactly. But you're right. It's messy because this person has confused the case with the way they did it, and as part of being confusing, they're a little, you're right, undeserving. So they have muddied these waters, and they're not super deserving. But like Sherlock Holmes, sometimes he takes cases where he charges lots of money. Other times he charges nothing. Sometimes he'll like say, your code of conduct annoys me, so I'm done with you. I'm done with this case. Other times, if he wants to work the case, he'll put up with an obnoxious person because I find the case interesting. I don't find you interesting. I don't find you to my liking, but this case intrigues me. So I feel like talking about Naiji couples versus Najez couples. That sounds interesting. But now we have to tidy up this person's messy delivery.
I mean, your parents are. I mean, I guess we want to get in the question right now. Your parents are both Naiji, so
I strongly believe that to be the case. I need video to confirm that, but going with lots of memory, which I do have, and I do have pictures. Yeah, Naiji.
I actually don't have much of a understanding of Naiji to Naiji as far as males and females go,
right,
or any other kind of
And thus this makes a good topic because it's fascinating. Totally. And as far as Naiji Temple goes, all the social alchemies we have are really important for us to discuss. And double Naiji in relationships is a thing. That's definitely a thing that happens, so it needs to be discussed so that we're savvy about it.
I mean, my parents, I think, they were like photo read as subjective romantic. So I mean, I could speak about what it's like to have double subjective parents, or even double sub-rom parents.
Anything that works.
Do you know what? I actually really like that, Ben. That actually gives us a third thing to triangulate here with to kind of talk about the differences. So we have a Naiji with a Naiji, which my parents, I believe, are, and then you see them also in pop culture. Then you have Naiji with Jaini. You also see that happening both in couples in pop culture and also the way they cast things. Myself and Jailene many years ago dated, and I dated many Jaini back in the day, particularly when I was feeling more pissed off at the world. I think maybe more pissed off now, but I was losing control, so the Jai really helped me.
Jailene is right there, by the way.
Yay! Hey, Jailene, you're awesome.
Hey, Jailene.
So tell someone that they're awesome, right?
On that, as far as code of conduct, Jailene and I have already talked about this, that it's a thing and it's part of our life, and we actually know a lot about that, and so it's just something we'll have to get comfortable speaking about. We'll try to keep our lives private as best we can, but that is something that we do actually have to know quite a bit about. And when it comes up, like in this case, it's relevant and useful. So we have Naiji with Naiji, well, obviously Najez together, and then comparing that to when, which is the ideal inspirational, comparing that to when Naiji go with either Jaini or, in this person's case, my parents as well, double Naiji. Okay, you said you like a little kind of like general on that, Glenn, and we can just go from there?
Yeah, like I was thinking maybe we could just discuss. Like, first of all, I'm trying to look at it in sort of a little bit more mathematical way. The powers, when you're with when you're with your other, you have none of the same powers, and each of the powers are in proper proportion in terms of ranking, and so that creates a different kind of interaction with the person. It creates a different kind of story altogether than when you have a Naiji with another Naiji, who basically share the exact same powers as you do, and so there can sometimes be a bit of a competitive thing going on there, and there can sometimes be, there's a competitive edge, even though the channels.
The best way to kind of bring it from mathematical to real world is to use these words, and when you use these words, it does it. From all the mathematical, inspirational or not, what happens whenever you don't have the ideal inspirational, which makes a complete storyline? You're going to have a not complete storyline. All right? So when that happens, there's two things that will occur. And everything that happens, we talk about the mathematics, will boil down to these two things. There will be a lack of something essential. And there will be excess of things to the point of having redundancy that can become toxic. Okay, so those two things will always be there. So a lacking and an excess. It's that turns the math into like, well, I feel that now. Yes, there will be, for example, with Naiji, there's a lacking of ni. You'll feel it. I mean, if you ever watched ni comedy, go watch Nijai, Nizai, Jaini, Zaini, and just watch that comedy, enjoy that, and now imagine that gone. That Jimmy, that's not going to be around every day in the room with you. And so that kind of gives you, like an actual, like, wow, it's going to be a much more serious, heavy world.
Yes.
Naiji, this game without other Naiji, a Naiji on their own, without adaptive, positive, inspirational energy around them, is going to be prone to being overly serious just by themselves. They'll need to have a very strong connection with their other to not be like that when they're by themselves. So now you add in another Naiji signal. The chances of being too serious, too tightly wound are going to be almost for sure. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And a good way of looking at that is you can see movies that are cast like that, where they're fun, and it's kind of interesting because like an extreme example is actually done by the Nizai director Quentin Tarantino, where he tends to cast his movies almost all Nai mojos, usually Nai Alpha. He has all these scenes where it's like Nai Alpha to Nai Alpha, like a Cobra Fest.
By the way, Coach, have you seen Django Unchained by any chance?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, it's so awesome.
It's so badass. I agree.
I was sad though when Kerry Washington. I believe
don't spoil it though.
No, I won't spoil anything. But I mean, like
Kerry Washington was revealed to be not a Nijai.
Not Nijai. She's the female. She's the female lover of the main character. So it was kind of sad to see. There's huge Gina.
And that gets into it because when you know the alchemy, it's so powerful and important that it can really sway you when you're trying to do reads because you're like, man, I want that movie. I'd like to be like this, or if it's a couple of like I want it to work out.
Oh, I guess okay. I'm gonna say this without spoiling, but do you remember like at the her reaction at the end, Coach? Like when there was that explosion, like she reacted in a certain way that kind of I don't know.
I'm sorry.
I can't say too much without spoiling it.
Right.
Because that would destroy the entire movie.
But back to the thing with having say too much Nai around is that it's going to actually be lacking that Ni. Okay. So that lacking already exists for the Naiji even when they're alone, unless they do a lot to project it into art and causes, but still to have a person would be the best. All right, so now without that, there's a lacking going. You introduce another Naiji, the lacking still is there. That lack of Ni has not been anywhere, like mathematically, that's just a mathematical fact. These are givens. And I'll speak to even my parents on this. It is what it is. I think anyone can actually have a positive relationship with another person, have a wonderful life. So there's always social alchemy to be had to heroic levels with any pairing. But there are certain mathematical givens that are in place, and those have to be recognized. For example, if two Naiji are going to be successful together, and I think you can be, there needs a recognition that they're actually projecting their other into their cause. They'll do their cause better, they'll be with their other better, they'll love each other better, and not expect, because otherwise you're going to inadvertently be projecting your Nijai other onto your Naiji mate and wanting them to be things that they're not. And you know what I mean, you can actually have it when you're with a Naiji.
You need to be knowledgeable of that. I mean, it's a very.
Otherwise, you're not going to be honorable about it. You can't be.
I mean, there's ways you can create positive connections and stuff, and even romantic connections. But I mean, you have to know what's going on.
For sure. And like I said about with Glenn there, when you get to it, you're going to have to deal with when you go away from the ideal storyline. A complete storyline is meant to go together, 8 powers, and they interlock with their powers. Momentum, modulation, conscious to unconscious, it's just perfectly aligned. When you go off of that arrangement, you are automatically going off of the way natural law has put together an ideal, harmoniously productive unit. So the lacking is going to be there. There just will be the lacking of the knee. So a Naiji needs to have knee in his life, or her life. So you can have that through shows, through watching shows, through having businesses where you interact with a lot of knee. And there's ways you can do besides having an actual intimate mate, but you'll simply have to have your life, or you're going to be too dour, too serious, too tightly wound. So I know periods in my life when I was really feeling like that, I actually would watch a lot of like knee-eye comedy, but you'll simply have to do that to get your alchemy right. I mean, you can think of yourself kind of like a cocktail of various chemicals. The human body is. You're a cocktail of these various 8 powers, and if you get malnourished, you have a lack of a vital nutrient, you're not going to be able to operate correctly. So then the other one is how much Nai is in the environment. Yeah. Because as a Naiji, you're already putting out a strong amount of Nai. So what's going to happen with the Naiji with Naijis, they're going to have to do one of 3 scenarios. The one is the most evolved and enlightened, which is they recognize this and they will bring in Ni through their career and causes and other things, their creations, that way to bolster the need for Ni in the environment of that relationship, as well as taking periodic breaks from each other to go do their individual dragon things so they don't over-dragon the area and actually turn on each other dragon-wise. That's a simple thing. Is dragons actually at some point need to go to a lair where they're the only dragon, which is actually why they're ideally suited for the Nijai, because the Nijai is the first creature that can approach them, and it's actually something that they can not feel threatened. Dragons will feel threatened by other dragons. So it's interesting to note is that it's a number thing. When you think of like your first recognition cell in social alchemy, that's you. The next is your other. And then you keep going like that, and then you also return to you and add more members. But it's a critical thing here, kind of like programming, like binary code sequencing, is you are the first one on the tier of like single add-ons. And then there's levels of additional add-ons. But as far as single add-on, it's you are Naiji. The next single unit to get added on is Nijai. Of that single adding. Adding another Naiji on is actually making a group of Naiji. And so there is a competitiveness to that Naiji had to step away from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's why when Naiji are at their most intimate in their lair, the creature that can actually come to them first is not another Naiji. It's the Nijai. Another Naiji, when a Naiji is at their most vulnerable and intimate, will be perceived as a threat very often.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
So, and this is getting into that person's question. These are critical things. You start talking about intimate relationships. You're talking about your lair. The Naiji will be in their lair mode a lot around this other person. And when they're on the road, you're going to be having a lot of your game, which is necessarily mysterious for the Naiji, being known by the other Naiji because you have to kind of swap trade secrets in order to operate with another Naiji and not step on each other's toes. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
The Nijai actually does not require the Naiji to be as revealing in a way because their sixth sense can kind of like operate off you without you speaking it out.
Right. That's interesting.
That helps out a lot.
Naiji need to sort of like reveal to each other to sort of like create a kind of bond in a way.
For sure.
That's what you're saying. I see.
Exactly. And so like with us now, we can be deeply bonded as two because this is like the first core that builds around you as a Naiji with other Naiji. But when you kind of like boil back to like the simplest you, this is the math of it. If you boil you back to the simplest you, it is you as the conscious genius with your unconscious genius keeping you company. That's your most. If you know what I mean, if you just bring back your life bubble to its absolute fundamentals, it's you as the conscious genius hanging out with your unconscious genius, going on adventures. So you know what I mean? So everything else actually expands out from there. So thus, because of that, because you are constantly enacting half of it, the easiest thing to add on next is the other half of that story.
Yeah, because that's what's needed in order to make it take it further, to make it more stackable. In Naiji, it's sort of like you're adding. You're not really adding adding anything more to it except just a different kind of Naiji into that same kind of thing. So it's different kind of.
It can be very helpful. There is definitely an augmentation relationship, and it's serious. Like I get a lot of energy from you guys, but here's the issue: if you don't have the connection to the other like you need to, the power. Because this is important. I get a tremendous amount of power from being with you guys, and Naiji in general get a tremendous amount of power. That's the problem.
I guess that's the
problem.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Well,
what's the point? What's the point? The point is to peak on the whole 8-power story. So obviously you have 4 powers, and if you get the other 4 powers in the other person, boom, you're already starting. This is critical. Critical. This is where they misstep. This is where they get it off. You have begun to solve the actual case, because the actual case is an 8-power case with 2 sets. That's the case. Anything else, you have not yet begun to work on the case. Okay, let me explain this so it'll make sense. Let's say you are a Naiji hunter, all right, and you're going to run around and do hunter stuff in some dangerous land.
Now you have 2 Naiji hunters. They're both hunting things.
Right, but let's get into that for a second. I'm get that. Okay. No, you're right. You're right.
Sounds good. Yeah.
But I'm going to get there second. The first thing is if it's done correctly, they have the Nijai, which is they then see the other 4 powers they're missing. So in the dangerous land they're hunting in, they now realize what it is that they're supposed to accomplish. This is so critical, because what will happen otherwise is you're running around in the wild place, the dangerous place by yourself without those 4 signals. You're inclined to pay attention to what? Hunting priorities, to the exclusion of those other priorities, particularly gathering and towering, that you don't normally do. Okay? And so what happens is when another Naiji comes in, you are already in hunter mode. When you look at them and go, what should we do tonight? You know what they're going to say? Hunt. They're always going to say hunt. They're another hunter. And so and this is the key. They hunt like you, and if they're helpful in bringing down prey and other stuff, you feel very powerful. And this makes it harder to actually get the story really going. I'll use an analogy from this that I often did when I was doing the grappling teaching. I'd remember very few things, but certain things were critical, and they're kind of like mindset stuff that have like metaphors. You don't need to know the details of this except just the basics. In grappling, there is a position called close guard, okay, where you wrap the person up with your legs very tightly. And then there's another version of it called open guard, where the legs are open. The open guard version is much more advanced, and it moves much more quickly, and there's nothing you can really do about that, so a lot of people avoid it until they get more advanced. But here's the problem. Real fighting includes the animalistic positions of close guard and open guard. If you are not including both in your regiment, you're not actually doing real full fighting. But what a lot of people do is, it's kind of like training wheels. They will only do close guard in order to actually feel like they're accomplishing something. But what happens is, they start feeling good at it. And the better they get at it, the more they resist doing open guard. They just run from that whenever it comes up and just fearfully scramble for close guard until they can get it. They can't get it, they lose. If they can get it, cool, I'm back to this safe position I know. Okay, so what happens is, the better they are at it, consistently, when you try to get them to do open guard, it's more of a freaking pain in the ass, because they've gotten so much like confidence and sense of winning and pride, right, and reputation as being good at doing that. And when they step over this other area, which you need to do to be good at the whole game, they avoid.
Like motoring.
Because it feels bad. It doesn't feel like the way that they felt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like with your lens. Like, you need to update it, right? You don't. I mean, you don't want to just like. You're not trying to maintain the same lens.
This actually goes back to, this is great, this goes back to the person's question. If we give them the answers that they want without actually the caveats that we put tonight, which I know they're going to find a little uncomfortable, they actually are correct to put there, it's going to make it harder for them to do the necessary given of going on camera to get their mojo properly confirmed. They need to do this, and the more you would give them information around that, they're getting what they want without doing what they need.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Isn't actually getting what they really want.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. Perpetuating the problem in a way.
Yeah, when you're a hunter, you're going to be getting what you want a lot, which is to go hunting for stuff and bringing down big prey and getting to feed off of that. But that's a lot of times not what you need. I mean, you need the rest of the 4 powers, but that'll take stretching. So that's critical. And this gets into it, is that to be a hero, you have to stretch. The first stretch is like getting your mojo ready. To recognize that it's not an opinion question, you have to go and accept what the answer is and then adjust from there. Then, next, what your other requires. Most people, by the way, they are just not good at being a human being. Humans are awesome in design, but they're not good at doing it. And one of the main things is, obviously, lack of education. But another one is conditioning to not really doing very well, but expecting other humans to do well or to help you out with your faulty game. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they actually bring it to all their relationships, and so they actually are going to be, when they're around their other, exposed to demands and expectations on their heroic performance they don't want to hear. So those are things people have to, I think, deal with right away. Is that I think 2. 1, get your mojo read, and then 2, see how you interact with a healthy version of your other in real life form. Because you have to know what your mojo is. No one is above that getting done. It's just like the first thing you have to do. And then, if you actually cannot turn on your own other in your head and actually know how to interact with them in the world, then you're not doing so good. You're like, you can't tell me that. Yes, you can. 2 things you can be told. Your mojo is what it is, and your other people of your mojo and your other can very much have a huge say into how you're doing. If you don't actually have any of your mojo thinking you perform well, then that's actually an issue. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It can even be a few of them, but they have to be like people who are of high quality. Otherwise, you have to ask yourself, is it me? And people don't like to ask that question. You know what I mean? Am I doing something wrong? But a lot of times, abductive reasoning.
It's uncomfortable for everyone. But like,
ask yourself first, did you miss anything?
Yeah.
If you're willing to do that, a lot of times you'll see it. And that yinness, that willingness to ask yourself, what's missing and is it me? If the ability to do that, because then you can turn that light on everyone else. But first on yourself. Yep. Turn on yourself.
And that's why you need to have a connection to your Nijai other, because otherwise you wouldn't really. You wouldn't be nearly as open to asking those questions, like whether it actually is.
Oh, you brought a great thing.
Massification of your EO is very important.
Yeah.
This thing what you're talking about, Glenn, about as far as the competition, I'll turn it over to you. But on that is it turns into dueling, because when hunters are talking to other hunters, even when you're friendly, you turn things over based on a hunter's skill and who is good at what, and you change the baton based on that. That's how hunters change who's talking, who's in charge, who's leading up what case. But sometimes you need to grow without doing that hunter hierarchy. Mm-hmm. Gatherers don't do hunter hierarchy. They do, is it interesting? Is it fun? Does it make my heart warm? You know what I mean? So it's a totally different set of things that you have to need that. Yeah. I know, because like when you have double Naiji, is there will become basically a lot of alpha and beta of like certain people using cold shoulders, or using I know more about this, so you have to listen to me, or you had or kind of like an implied, you had the turn to be hunter last night or on this subject, it's my turn to be hunter, and there's like a lot of need to kind of like timeshare the hunter time.
If you think about like 2 people who are like after the same target, like it becomes kind of inefficient. I mean, to not have somebody else do, I mean, it's much more effective to have specialization. That's actually gets into bigger bubbles than just 2 people. But I mean.
No, but you are right. It goes out all of the social alchemy benefits by actually having a collection of specialists that work together real smartly. So yeah, and the way I look at it is you need all 8 powers on the board to actually know what the board is. And if I had to boil it down, that's the biggest issue I would say, is that you're going to have a tendency for the Naiji, and this happens almost every time that you have double Naiji, and you can have more healthy versions of it, but it's something they'll have to account for. You know what I mean? It's just a sort of like a counterbalance they'll have to do, which is wanting to solve the case at the necessary expense of the other person. One person has to take less of a shine. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so if you have all 4 powers, all 8 powers, and therefore all the inspirationals, then you're getting validated, and no one needs to dance when you are dancing. It limits confidence and fluency somewhat as a Naiji. If every time you start doing Naiji, you're going to be questioned if you're good enough
to do Naiji.
The Naiji in charge today or at this moment. Mm-hmm. The Nijai will say, are you good enough for my Ni to find interesting? Are you good enough for my Jai to trust you? This is critical. Mathematically, they never ask the question, are you good enough to be the Naiji? If you're the only Naiji, they'll ask that, and this is where you have to be good. Having Naiji to train with, like we're doing, is awesome, so you can be a badass. But if you're the only Naiji around, and there's only one Nijai around, there's no question of who's going to be doing the Naiji stuff.
Yeah, there's no question.
Yeah.
It's like,
and this is critical. Now there is competition. There's several Naiji, and there's, say, one Nijai. So now you got to be competitive. You're going to get fierce. It's never turned on the Nijai. It's in the Nijai service. You're like, the Nijai wants a Naiji who can do this. And then you're like, I'm going to beat every Naiji here. And that's good. It's good for a Naiji. Right there, if you know the heart of a Naiji is competitiveness, it's good to want to be able to heroically be the best Naiji around, at least a given thing that a given Nijai is interested in, to earn the right to be the singular Naiji of that Nijai story.
Yeah.
Yep.
The Nijai, they look at it more from the perspective of like, yeah, are you Naiji enough to sort of like be with me, or like to chill or hang with me? With Naiji to Naiji, it's more like they're looking at each other in a very competitive way. It's like they're both trying to go after the same goal, and they're looking at each other as they're going at the same goal. And they're like, no, I'm going to trip you up, and then I'm like, no, I'm going to get you, and then trying to like.
And there is like a heroic element too, which the Nijai can identify. So that's why, that does mathematically work. It does make sense.
Yeah, I think. There's like a lot to it. And I know the Naiji, they like to go with each other a lot. And I think the reason is because it is very comfortable, and you don't have to, because the Nijai is very, very understanding of the Naiji ways. It's the most understanding mojo of the Naiji's ways that is not a Naiji. And that's what you need. You need an extremely understanding partner that's going to Nijai Z and value. Otherwise, you won't do stuff that you need to do. And you'll have a skewed value system. And the one I see the most common is there's a harshness and an incorrect evaluation that goes with it towards gatherers. That they're flighty, whorish, inconsequential, any number of things that basically means of low worth. And so how you evaluate worth, you need to actually understand all 4 priorities of psyche and what they need. Otherwise, you don't evaluate what humans do, their gifts, appropriately. You weight everything on a hunter system, because that's all you're really used to doing is evaluate humans, based on
that is true.
criteria.
It kind of reminds me of like Game of Thrones, where some of the Ni Alpha, they don't get along very well with the Ni Alpha, and it can go down very dark roads, but it's kind of like not very ideal, and there's a kind of mindset that happens there where they'll kind of like look at the Ni Alpha and they'll kind of like, I don't know, evaluate them according to hunter rules, which I think is inappropriate, or not the way it's supposed to be.
I think to bring up one thing is on that with Gotham. You haven't got a chance to watch it yet, but I'll just mention one thing that I find interesting is the relationship between the young Bruce Wayne and the Catgirl, Nai-Ji, and she's played by Ni Zai. Which is interesting because usually it's Nai-Zi with Ni Zai, so it's kind of a fun twist. But some of the scenes where they're interacting, I won't go into specifics for spoilers, but that overall you can compare it to being with another Nai-Ji, is one, when she asks questions, there's a more playful energy to it, which doesn't set him off, and it's open-ended. Which
yes, definitely that.
He's an awesome detective, but he's focused on solving his parents' murder, and so he approaches everything from that Nai. That's what he's working on. So her knee gets him to do other stuff, but actually that improves him and helps him with solving his case. But otherwise he wouldn't do that. The other one is, and this is critical as far as like the Ji, for example, is when Nai-Ji with Nai-Ji in intimate relationships even, they can do it fiercely or very, very, subtly and sophisticatedly, but there's going to be a laying forward of your Ji case of why you think things should go a certain way. And you can be, diplomatic about that or very, very forceful, but that's just the way Ji's going to do it. So there's also often a question of force or simply who outdid who. But when you have Ji with Zhai, it doesn't work like that. It makes you both more sensitive on approach and to weigh your conduct afterwards more lingeringly. So on approach is her Zhai is skittish. So whenever he moves his Ji forward, he is morally in the high ground. And he's asking questions that are relevant. And if you actually are talking, it's interesting, Nai-Ji, you can make another Nai-Ji concede that, which is where it gets weird. Nai-Ji can even, not just like say they're arguing, they can agree a lot, but there's not actually the feeling that they got to those sacred resources. So with her, if he doesn't approach in a certain way, her Zhai will simply bolt. So he has to account for that, and it makes his Ji much better. The other one is, she's not really closing any rituals. She leaves them open, so he has to close them. And closing a ritual a certain way for a person who doesn't close them on their own is a completely different thing than with another closer. And now we're talking about who gets to close and what's the correct way to close. That's important too. That's why Nai-Ji need to hang out with Nai-Ji, because you need to have those kind of talks, improves your game. But other times, you're closing for a person who will not be doing it for themselves. You are responsible for the emotional closing a lot in the relationship. And one thing you'll find is you have to get a lot more smooth and understanding of people to deal with Zhai. As a Ji-Mojo, more than it's natively comfortable, they'll bolt just because they feel uncomfortable, and if you explain to them why it's not like that, it may or may not work. You need to give them something that they can feel comfort from, otherwise it doesn't count. With Ji to Ji, it's not. You need to explain your code of conduct and principles that make sense and you can stand by. Also badass and important, but that's a different thing than what you do with the Zhai. Does that make sense?
It's more theoretical. They're looking for more of like they might even listen to.
I don't think theoretical is the right word. It's an important semantic difference. It's more based on articulated principles.
Yeah.
You basically say, because this isn't theoretical, because Bob is over here and that's Bob's wife, we need to do this. It's actually, we would be shitty people if we didn't do that. So that's not even theoretical, but the reasoning of it, and Ji uses, that's a certain ritual, and when that ritual comes up, you have to do a certain thing or you're not a good human. And Ji's good at convincing people of that. That's how we're motivated. But Jai doesn't think that way natively. It actually thinks of like Semite harmony.
Yeah, I want to just like the way that I see it is like with the Jai, it's more like they're not. Yeah, it's more like you might say something to them where it's like, oh, this is the right thing to do, but if they don't, they might even agree with you in terms of like yeah, I understand what you're saying, but if they don't feel it, if it's not something that actually is something that they resonate with, they're not going to be completely with it, and that's actually more important for them is to feel that. Very adaptive, sort of like Jai kind of inarticulable kind of experience kind of thing.
And I feel like with the Naiji and Naiji, things will often go down the road of over explaining oneself. Like both parties will be explaining oneself too much.
Actually, yes and no. That's a very good point. Yes and no. It's a different kind of explaining.
Mm-hmm.
And it basically takes it from the point of, is this the right thing to do? And the explaining is focused on, is this the right thing to do? When G goes with G, it's back and forth of, is this the right thing to do and why? And the explanation of why it's the right reason to do whatever can go on and on and on. That's important. It can get very, very nuanced and very, very passionate. But with Jai, it's different. A lot of times they'll go along with it because you're the pusher. Then the explanation is, how do I make the journey? G generally knows how to make journeys on its own. It's a dynamics mover. So it's going to ask you, why are we going this way? Explain to me why anyone would go this way. Jai naturally doesn't have maps and a drive to go a particular way. So when that is required, they are inclined to defer to that and other, particularly if it's an Naiji who knows what they're doing. So then the question is, they've agreed to go on the journey that you said, and they put their Jai in your hands. And now they're cool with going to Madrid. To say that the G might be like, we shouldn't go to Madrid, or if we do go to Madrid, we should take a train, not the boat like you want to take or whatever. Okay? So the Jai's like, I didn't really have a plan, and your Madrid thing sounds pretty good. So, I mean, they're like, okay, the Jai agrees to go on the Madrid trip. Now you are responsible. They don't even argue about taking the boat over a train or whatever. They just go with the boat with you. They'll argue with how happy or shitty that boat trip is.
Yep.
And then when you get to their harmony, will let you know if that is a harmonious journey. And then when you get to Madrid, they didn't argue about going to Madrid because they were open-ended. They're like, okay, I didn't really have a firm plan. You seem like you had a Madrid plan. When you go to Madrid, you better have a plan that you know how to shepherd and can take them along. And their Jai's like, ooh, I like what we're doing. So that's the kind of like push and pull you'll get from the Jai is on how well you deliver on the plan you want to do. Where G's more like, what plan are we doing and how and why? Jai doesn't really care. He wants to know the experience.
Yeah.
Is it a good one? And that's a different demand. So in that case, you have to explain to the Jai how we go on the boat, all the cool things the boat has, how you enjoy the cool things on the boat, you know what I mean? And basically kind of like walk them, give them a tour of the goodies of the way you've chosen.
Yeah, it makes more sense that way because it's sort of like they're adapters, right? The idea is it's going to be like, okay, cool, but then when you actually get to it, then it's like, how does it actually work out as far as like when you're actually in the boat or in the train or like, how was that experience? Was it a good experience? How good are you as a person as far as like your plan in terms of like going down all the peak pathway to all the adaptive powers as well and honoring them appropriately, and then in that kind of way.
Yeah, for sure. It's almost like you have like shepherds with G, where they're kind of discussing how you shepherd stuff. And that's kind of like the talk and how you do it correctly, whatever. But if you're talking to Jai, you're actually shepherding the sacred resources. So the question is, did you do the shepherding on that correctly?
Yeah.
Jai, it's like a 4951 of like good bad. It lets you know if you were shepherding well or not.
It gets directly to what's actually
moment to
needed.
moment.
I mean,
moment to moment.
Yeah. Moment to moment kind of stuff, yeah.
Whereas it's a little more makeshift. If you're asking that question for G, it doesn't quite work out as well. If you're getting rid of that. But I mean, there are important times when you need to have a G back and forth on things. But I mean,
absolutely. And there are times when you need to kind of geek out a bunch of Naiji because you do need to improve your game for your whole life. And being around other Naiji, you'll be able to do it without being embarrassed of its native process. Now there's gonna be heights of like intimacy and so forth that you'll need a Nijai to bring you out to. But in the initial like being a dragon and like roaring and everything, even other Nijai will think that stuff's kind of freaky after a while. So it's just kind of like two ends of the spectrum. With Nijai, they help you a lot with being at the furthest end of your pathway, like the V. You know what I mean? The stiffness register, and actually making that safe and awesome and taking the rest of the peak pathway. But being with another Naiji, what's helpful there is when you need to like do Nai in its raw form, which can be very alarming to people, they don't tend to get alarmed. Even your other will get, everyone gets alarmed when Naiji do gnarly stuff. You know what I mean? So,
but Nai Alpha get the least alarmed, and they're more understanding of that.
Yeah. And that's where I get back to like, and where it can be good to be with another Nai Mojo, definitely as friends, and sometimes even as intimate partners, to help you know how to be a Naiji on your starting shore, like how to be angry, how to be detached, how to be opinionated, and so it helps. But you don't want to get to where them teaching you how to do it teaches you that's the only thing you do, because once you know how to actually attached and opinionated, you're supposed to go out there and meet a Nijai and finish the story up.
You're supposed to like keep going beyond that, and that your Nijai helps you do that the best. I mean, that's
for sure.
Yeah, it's all about like trying to set up your entire life. There's different people can be different things for you as far as like how your entire peak pathway and your overall story is unfolding and becoming better. So if you want to have like an Naiji as your intimate person, then you can have that, but you still need to have that Nijai influence coming in from some other area in your life. And all the other mojos in some capacity have to be a part of your overall life story. It doesn't. Individually, you can have them be whatever kind of Mazout kind of position, but it doesn't really matter in that respect.
And certain ones are easier to do than others, but no, you can have any combination of social alchemy, light bubble, you can imagine and have it be good, but you'll have to know, because back to that person's question, you'll have to know the givens you're working with. You know what I mean? You can have all kinds of cool arrangements of social alchemy as far as a light bubble.
And there are some bubbles better than others. There are some bubbles, in certain times are better than others. So having that awareness, I mean, can help you engage with what you have, but also it can help you figure out, what's best for me. What am I looking for? What do I need? Who should I be interacting with for this?
Exactly.
So
you look at what you need. You look like I have plenty of Naiji, so I need to actually have Nijai in my life a little bit.
I want to connect with this
person
more. Yeah.
Through this kind of activity, I need some Nijai influence in my life.
That's why you need to always have at the core of you that spiritual practice, and it helps to have a temple, but we start with a temple of one. And when you have a temple of one, what you're basically worshiping is your own peak path, which is this Nejez story. And so the rest of your life is to make that grow. And you can make a Nejez story grow by having a partner who's Naiji or Jaini or other things. I mean, that can be done, but you must understand that the core thing that you are doing, you are living, is a Nejez storyline. If you do that, then you actually are honoring things appropriately. Because one thing that Naiji do a lot with their effective reasoning is you need to really understand things in a way that maybe people normally don't, or you can't honor them. Otherwise, you are honoring illusions, and you're trying to make people be things that they're not, and that's not being honorable. That's just being comfortably ignorant.
It's funny. I was thinking about that one movie that you said you didn't watch, Coach, World War Z, and it was kind of inspired because of the one sample that we had in our quiz, and she was a part of the movie, and she was casted alongside Brad Pitt, and they're both Naiji, and it's interesting how I never watched the movie itself, but it's interesting. There's two Naiji, and then they're in this kind of like very epic sort of like life or death kind of situation in the story, because apocalyptic, I would think, because it's kind of like zombies and stuff like that.
Right.
There's a lot of like Naiji, a lot of like Nai Alpha Hunterish kind of like energies in that, but then
that happens a lot in this kind of movies.
Yeah, but then there's a lacking, I would think, is as far as like Ni. I'm not sure who the entire cast is. Maybe they have more Ni from different actors, but
they populate heavily with Nai. Yeah.
Yeah, but it seems like there's definitely like a lot of Naiji, and then even the story is very Naiji. Nijai and like Ni Alpha and Adaptives, I think they kind of like the more romantic comedies, kind of like that kind of thing a little bit too. It's kind of like important to have a little bit of mix of everything. But yeah.
No, that makes it makes a more complete story. Because otherwise, it becomes a bit myopic in a way for like certain kind of priorities.
Yeah, it becomes a bit too. Like you can crank up a signal too much, and then it becomes like excessive, and then it becomes kind of like hard to hear. You don't want to listen to that because it's like too much of it.
Hard to hear. I like I said that, and another quality is, and it's related to it kind of being hard to hear a bit, is it's not true. It starts bothering you that this is a very particular way of looking at life with a very particular alchemy associated with it, and it's being presented, particularly keeps going on. This is being presented as life.
Yeah, and obnoxious too.
It's a very particular, specific, concentrated kind of alchemy. And Nai can be very bad at that. We're really good at breaking through certain barriers that no one else can, but we can also like break ground and show the way that you can first do something in a Nai way, and then make it to where you say that's the only way that you can or should be doing it. And anything else is soft and weak and pathetic.
Yeah.
Not worth the time.
Yeah. Always have to be
like
open-minded.
Super elitist.
Yes, exactly. For sure, when you have double Naiji or any double hunter, but definitely double Naiji, the elitism thing, Naiji will have to work on that. Elitism, and a whole bunch of stuff, really. Elitism, and another one is absolutism. The tendency to think and speak in absolutisms all the time, because it is more native to the Naiji.
Wait, what's absolutism again?
Absolutism is the opposite of relativism. So relativism is you can have different things happening in a sort of kind of isolation of individualism, individual circumstances to each situation or person.
I see.
Absolutism is, no, gravity absolutely is this such and such force, and I don't care if we're talking about hockey or how you make a Twinkie, gravity's fucking relevant, and it works a certain way. And so Nai tends to think in absolutes, whereas Ni tends to think in relativism, which is why I can cross-contextualize so well. They're like, well, for them it can work like that. They kind of individualize and customize. That's why it's so good at demassification. You know what I mean?
It's according to like the situation. Like this, the way me kind of see things is like this situation is its own thing, and like let's see what happens here. And Nai is always thinking in terms of like, and they both really help each other out because Nai is always trying to find like an answer that's
universally applicable.
And you can also think about like how time changes, things like evolve and change, right? About one situation. So even if it's the same situation, it's still changing, evolving.
For sure.
You know? So you have to keep track of that too.
Definitely. But back to the general thing is of what absolutism, we kind of talked about what it is there a little bit, is just there will be an excessive amount of it whenever you have a lot of hunters. And basically when you have a lot of hunters, it can be in a movie, it can be in real life, it basically becomes whose absolute is the best, i.e. wisest with predictions and most potent in application. And so a lot of times that might not even be the question. Ni can ask a different question other than which worldview reigns supreme. He'll ask you like, can your worldview make a cool ice cream cone or something else? He'll ask you like that, not as like top one.
And then the Nai Alpha is like, I didn't think about ice creams.
I know.
I'll think about gravity.
I was thinking about custard. I don't know.
Because it's related. It's related, and it's something that can be very useful to get into. And if the Nai is correct, and this is what reign supreme should truly be. Yes, Nye is concerned about reigning supreme as far as who's the wise and knows what's going on. But the whole point of that is to have correct answers that you could apply to any and all things. Nii will ask you any and all questions to any and all things, and that will really test your Nye. Not just can it best another Nye, but the more inspiring, can it answer all the Nii's questions? And by the way, you're going to be a real Nye badass. You'll be a badass Nye by being able to answer any Nii questions. If your Nye can answer any Nii questions, then when you get in a duel with another Nye, you're going to school them. Because they're really one thing. It's one thing.
They approach it from the perspective of the female
sex. Your scope. Your scope's going to be bigger and more interesting and nuanced than theirs will be.
Totally.
Because otherwise what happens is you actually get in the habit of not updating unless someone can beat you. But then you know what happens? Just like in grappling. Then you win a lot when matches go a certain way. But every freaking time they go someplace you don't like to bounce to in your model, you lose like a punk. So Nii will playfully bounce you all over your model, even in your more awkward areas, more sensitive areas, so you work on them. Otherwise you don't, and the only time you work on them is when another Nye hits your ass. That's not very fun.
You're more likely going to be hit harder with the things that you aren't aware of.
Yes,
if you don't have
sting.
If you don't have a connection to Nii.
It's better to have your things that you don't have in your Nye pointed out through playfulness if you can, rather than competition. I mean, it's good. Like as a Naiji, I mean, I actually like talking with you guys and hearing your pushback and your angles, and it's fun and it makes me grow in that way too. But before I do that, I have conversations with my other first. Even right now, when I'm talking to you guys, when you guys will say stuff, and you're doing it too, if you think about it, you'll have a brief little mini conversation in your head before you speak, and you do this all the time. That mini conversation is you with your spirits. It's heavily related to you with your other.
Yeah.
So pretty much the better your mental chatter is between you and your other, the better you'll talk to everyone, even other Naiji. When I talk to other Naiji, I'm talking to them through the Najez chatter I have in my head, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Totally, I understand that. Man.
Cool.
Nii is like necessary.
And having a Nijai will help improve that chart.
Yeah, for sure. We can go ahead and call it for tonight. I think we did a really good job on that, but I don't want to rush things off. You guys have anything else you want to talk about or ask, but I'm here and welcome to do that. But we did a good job, I think, of having a nice temple and answering a good question in the process.
Oh, it feels like there's something that I want to say, but I don't.
Yeah, no rush. Sometimes you take a little moments, we can kind of just see anything comes to us. So we kind of like just this nice, just kind of this like talking to other here a little bit. I do this a lot with Nexi, where after I do some more focused training, I often am in like a bit of an altered state. I feel kind of like a bit quasi-statey, you know what I mean? And so if you just kind of sit with it and not try to make it anything, neat stuff will come to you. I often have a lot of like good chat with her, like after I do like a nice push on like beats or Mojiri, something specific, where I focus myself as a Naiji. I'm like, I'm gonna go Kensei and some art. But then afterwards, I'm like, okay, I did that. What does that mean? And we just sit and kind of like do it. You get kind of like giggly, like when you look at the V you just did. You're like, hey, I did that. Do you ever do that like when you like rearrange your room or do anything else with V, say Mojo reading or whatever, or like say Glenn when you do the visuals, and afterwards you're spent, but you did that cool thing. And now you're kind of just like sitting with it, just kind of sitting and looking at it and like, oh.
Yeah, I do that.
My other likes to come around a lot at those moments.
Yeah, you just kind of like, I kind of find myself like, I remember yesterday we had the hangout and stuff, and then I was looking at and then I knew I had to do other things, but I just felt like I wanted to just look at the pictures one more time, scroll up and down, see like, this is what we went through, this is what we did, and it's very much sort of just like it just like for some reason I just felt compelled to want to like linger on that for a little bit
Once
longer.
you accomplish it correctly, your other approves. It becomes a spirit force that you can kind of like go hang out in. You feel like a connection, I think, to the inspiration power of your other, particularly the Nii and the Jai. And then what can happen after this, kind of tying it all back to what I talked with Mitchell, you'll sometimes then feel, after sitting with it and kind of just enjoying it and letting new ideas kind of percolate in, a desire to sound off. of like what you've done and what you're about and what you can. You mean like you'll kind of feel like talking to the world, and what that is, I do all the time, and Mitch was kind of doing a little bit in the email. Is you can do it in print or out loud or on camera, whatever, but you kind of sound off in a way that you can feel your other going, that's right, baby, and the Z vibe going, chick, 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 that's on the board. Say it again. Without, like, say, how did you get? That's right, you brought down this many things. It kind of like records your hunter wins. And so if you do it correctly, first there's like a new spirit force. You kind of just enjoy that. And your other dances around. You kind of just like, man, this is really cool. I'm in a new world. Anytime as an IG you do something where you kind of make a new world, like with the visuals you've done, Glenn, that's a new world now. Your other will like to play in that, and you'll kind of get that. And then there'll be like the Z and Vi of like stating to yourself what you've done. It's very, very important to your self-validation. And again, it kind of brings back why you need the Ni Zhai. The Ni and Zhai will recognize when you go from Ni to V, and you're sitting there looking at the V that you just did. Then the Ni and Zhai comes in and plays, and only when it plays with the Ni, and it's like, this is so neat and interesting. And the Zhai's like, oh, you did so good, baby. This makes me feel good. I love it. Then you know, your 9G knows it did good. And then as far as your Zai and V of like, you know, am I a badass? Did I really deliver? The Z and Vi's like, oh no, that's better than this. That's better than last week. That's this new score. Those are facts, baby. That badass stuff you did, I love it, and they're fucking facts. Fact. Yeah, that's still sounding off, and your other likes that. As mentioned, Naiji in almost every art form, they sound off. And it can sound outrageous, but if it's true and they actually did or believe those things, then it's good to sound off, and your other likes it. They like that you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really cool to just see like how far you've come, and like I do this with everything, like emoji reading as well. I do this with when I notice other people and how far they've come as well. It's just sort of like you started off with kind of like in this kind of initial state, which was kind of like kind of not really. At the time, it was like the best thing that there was, and everyone thought it was like the best thing that there was. But then you kind of incremental steps, and now it's become this.
It was good for its time, but it was an earlier developmental model, and now we've
gone. It's like, do you see how far we've come? We made something so much way better. Like that one image, you know, it's like it's so much better.
That ebook is looking really good, by the way.
I'm so proud. Oh, and the incantation stuff is coming along really good, and they're liking it. Oh, they're liking it at the coffee shop. I don't really talk about that much, but the baristas.
That matters. That's important.
They like the beat. They like the beats.
Yay!
Oh, and it is such a rush. Like Demons went up the other day, and he and I both did the same thing because there's one of the baristas that's shyer than the others, and so we were doing it for her. Although the one that's the most friendly and we're having the most taking her the furthest so far, even still, it was really nerve-wracking doing it for her. Even she's super friendly, just doing it in front of a live Ni Zhai. On the shy one, me and Demas both actually like stumbled a bit, but it was totally fine on beats that we had totally down, and we just did them down and like timed before we went up. Like we were actually at the shop nailing it down.
Because you have this anxiety about what's about to happen, right?
It's hot, and we went up there. We still had a little fumble just because we weren't used to this person, and it sounds so subtle, but she blinked her eyes and made Zhai moans and lip rolls in a different way than the other ones did. That's it. That's all. The other ones like did it sooner or more or different. She did it less times, and when she did, she was less demonstrative. But she was having a good time. But just like registering the Ni Zhai's different signals while doing it, I was like, ah. That's why I do like stuff. You gotta get it down to where it's muscle memory. Metaphysical or physical muscle memory, so that when you're doing it, you just don't think, you just do it.
Yeah, and that's like totally like I was thinking, because actually it made me think about that one thing that we were talking about. We talk about several times is like we do these training things, and then we become really, really good, and we kind of like want to become uber good, like 16 hours kind of good, because when we actually apply ourselves in the real world, we want to make it feel like we want our HSP to be very like less, like very small, like very minorly impinged on. And the reason why we want to feel that is because, or we don't want to feel impinged on, is so that we open ourselves up to more to like other things that are available in the environment, I think, so that we're able to kind of like learn more from those kind of experiences and take more from them than if we were just in sort of like a more of a, like a, I need to get this done. You need to have that. You need to be in a higher mind state in order to sort of like appreciate the moments more in that kind of way, by kind of pushing those kind of initial thoughts out of the way and like far beyond it.
That properly. Like I said, we won't need 16 hours in the beginning, although I want to have it eventually. We will, in the beginning, need to have about 3 to 4 hours, basically about 1 hour roughly or more, of both the Nijai and Naiji on them, but then also on general stuff, set pieces, and then also on those general FAQ quick questions. That's the basic conversation you're going to be having over and over again. And so the sooner you can do that, and myself as well, on auto, we can have more advanced conversations on more advanced topics and also talk to them about whatever's on their mind, whatever subjects they bring up, because that to us is like something interesting and new and different for this encounter, which we look forward to, as opposed to we are still trying to get our head around the basic conversation lexicon of like, Nijai stuff and general stuff, because then you can't appreciate what they're bringing. You actually find like overwhelming, like it's more stuff I have to actually process, as opposed to I have the basic game down, and so all the custom information they're giving me, I can use that to do all the correct answers and to talk about stuff they'll find interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you'll have to have it kind of down yourself. Otherwise, your nervousness about the conversation, it kind of leaks on things.
Yeah, it'll kind of take up too much headspace, and it's gonna take away from like all the cool goodies that you can possibly get while you're interacting with a person, because you want to maximize that kind of moment as much as you can. And in order to do that, you need to have everything else be kind of like good and like worked out all the kinks on those kinds of things, so that they're not issues anymore, they're not weights anymore, and that's like really important.
And I think what we're doing, it's very exciting, and the beats are coming along nice, and like I said, the baristas are actually enjoying them, so I'm curious how they're going to react as I keep doing, all of us are doing more beats with them, and the subjects change, because it starts with the beats from the field pitch, which are designed to be done more out, so a little more general in what they're talking about, and then it gets into stuff from the L3 where it starts getting more specific and starts getting into like the relationship to the Naiji and spirit forms, then ends with like the revolution, like join the cause. So I'm curious how they're, because they kind of keep escalating as the beats go on.
Commercials just like that have like explosions and shit. Like
visuals like that.
Revolution. he's like leading like the campaign, the commercial campaign. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe we can make commercials on TV and stuff too.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like eventually they'll happen. That's mathematically that's going to happen, right? I mean,
definitely.
I was thinking about like the knee, because I kind of like want to go back to the question a little bit. Is there's like sometimes there's this one quote that's like on my mind a little bit, is like do something different every day is like I think a good thing to want to do in your life. So that kind of like something that feels a little bit uncomfortable, something that you don't feel 100% sure about, something you've never done before, never tried before. It's always good. It's always really good to have that in your life a little bit, so that's kind of like where your other kind of, I think, comes to you the most, is in those moments where you're like, oh, I don't know, I've never done this before, but then you try it, you do it, and then you kind of get used to it, and then you kind of like you want to have that kind of newness in your life. And I've done that actually and I found this very helpful, Coach, is what you've done is with like the TV shows that you offer to like want to watch, like Gotham. I've like, there wasn't any new episode that came this Monday, but
I know, like no.
I know. Last week it was what do you call it? Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that didn't have a new episode, but like little things like that, you keep yourself like. It makes my life a little bit more enjoyable in that kind of like, ooh, look at this. This is like a new thing instead of just being work.
Exactly.
Yeah. You need things like that in your life.
Taking the adventures that I'm doing, like, and I have to do like certain things that are arduous or scary, and making them seem really fun. You know what I mean? Giving like fun outlets for them that I wouldn't do normally. It gives me a lot of confidence and energy, and also it sometimes distracts me from things where like Nye and Vi are really good at holding on to a thought long term, but sometimes we just do not let thoughts go. And sometimes you have to put a thought down, just, you know what I mean? Give it a rest.
Yeah.
So Nye is great, kind of giving that necessary distraction. But the way it works, and they actually bring it up in Elementary. Now we mentioned this is kind of cool because you have it's Nye Z to Nye Zai, but still there. You have the Johnny Lee Miller Nye Z, Lucy Liu also Nye Z. But now they have a new mentee. This is new to the Sherlock Holmes mythos, which is a Nye Zai. So there's actually 3 of them at different levels. Sherlock Holmes is the top. Then there's like a journey person. He's like the master of this method he does, of deductive reasoning. Then a journey person is Watson. She's moved past being an apprentice. But now they've introduced an apprentice into the mix. And the apprentice is a Nye Zai. And so he gets help both ways. When he talks with Watson, he kind of like goes back with her. I would say sparring, but they kind of like, you know, jostle, kind of like 2 doctors discussing a case. And he says he finds that doing that and explaining to her why he's doing certain things gives him a lot of clarity and improves him. And it's one of the things that early on he went from just being about himself to actually being about another person in his life. And so having another, and she's a Nye Z who's well developed and has very good Jai, and helps him to explain what he's doing. And he considers her worthy enough to understand what he's saying, so he actually explains his thinking, which he says, and it's true, improves his thinking. Explaining his thinking to another person he respects helps his thinking. But then, this is new, they actually did it right, is they're playing her more like a Nye Zai. So they cast Nye Zai, and they're playing her like a Nye Zai. With her, it's different. She kind of like makes him bounce around more, and he often says like it's distracting or it's pointless, but then afterwards he's like, you know what, your pointless jumping around actually brought me over to here, which was brilliant. And he notes that that's interesting because like just the way you do it natively, I wouldn't actually think had merit, but he acknowledges that her bouncing around makes him smarter. So it's kind of cool. They do so far, the way the writing is, they're separating the way he is improved by talking to Watson, another Nye Z, and the way he's improved his detective work by actually interacting with the Nye Zai. Very cool. And so obviously for Nye Z, the same thing, talking to the Nye Z versus talking to a Nye Zai.
I think that actually brings up something that I've been working on myself, Coach, is sometimes the jumping around can sometimes seem, or like the ideas presented, they can sometimes seem like they're not really that substantial in a way. And then you kind of like, you're left sort of like, okay, what do I do with this? Right. And then it's kind of like, then like how do you like, I don't know, like how do you honor that sort of situation more effectively?
You become a genius. All right, and how you become a genius is solving this case, which is how to talk about what is the most important things that absolutely universally apply to everything, and answer what they're talking about, because there's always a way to do it, and in that lies genius. And that's
even if it's like, yeah.
Because if they're talking about what? They're talking about Pokemon dolls. There's something about the way Pokemon advertised, something about the stories embedded in it, something about the way she talks about it, something about how Pokemon is related to early childhood experience. There's some angle you can find that's potent, powerful, and makes you feel like you're talking about something important. Nothing is unimportant if you come at it from the right angle. So that ups the Nye Z perspective shifting to try to shift perspective of how to talk about the difference in goose down blankets versus artificial down blankets and actually make that relevant. Well, why do you have the two? What's the difference? Why do humans do that? Nye Z can always do that. Why do humans want down? Is it the fact that it comes from a special bird, or because it actually gives you comfort? Some people buy it because it's actual comfort. Some people for the bird. That's why even though there's artificial down that actually is more comfortable than like down, some people still like down from an actual bird. That's fascinating. That's human condition stuff. You can take anything and find a human condition angle to talk about, such as the difference between real down pillows and artificial ones, which is about as stupid and Pottery Barn as you can get.
Yeah, but then there's like also a desire to like want to keep the conversation interesting and be able to like.
That's what I'm saying. Okay, right there,
yeah.
You automatically be the most interesting person anytime you pull off genius. So, someone, and also it's also where Nige is so funny. You bring up the down thing of pillows, which seems like it has no upper level consciousness to it, but you can make it so. And when you do, it generally is brilliant and often funny because of how you need to connect that. It's connected, but often it'll make you giddy or giggle in how you're actually to make an important point off of that. And Nijai will think two things. One, you're a badass that you actually brought in some heavy level shit into a conversation about down pillows. And not only you badass, you're sexy, fun to hang out with. You actually took my thing about down pillows that was just thrown out there because I'm talking about whatever, and you act. I'll give for example, is talking to the one barista. She really had fun in a conversation we were having, and recently having several of these. And one thing that she really enjoys is as we're going through and looking at the pictures and the collage, it says down there different shows. She has all kinds of reaction to these different shows, and they're generally quick and small and different. And what I do is she says, oh, I know that person from such and such. I didn't like her chemistry with this actor. I say something clever about how chemistry is related to human design and how that's neat that she watches that, and she'll probably notice this in the future. Next sample. And the ability to tie in anything she wants to mention. She looks at these pictures and she takes them any direction she wants, but I know all of it. That's the Nige shows off its badassery. I can say something interesting about anything, and this is why, as you get more and more good at it, anything that's pretty much a conversation, and comedy is awesome for this, by the way, anything that's you can say in conversation, you can connect to something else. There's a way. There's always a way to connect something to something random to something you want to talk about. That's genius. You want to go here, but there's a mountain here. Mountain is random, but you need to get over here. So what do? You invent tunnels through it. Genius. You want to actually go over here and talk about, like, your sex life with this girl. The conversation they're having is whether butter and margarine are different. You make sexual innuendo between butter and margarine that makes this girl and you will get laid. Okay, so there's always a way to actually do it, and you'll be genius and usually often entertaining in the process. But as a part of that, impressive. It's both to the Nijai, you'll actually be impressive. Another Nai Alpha will also note that. But generally, they note that you do it impressively, and they tend to be more impressed with just straight monologuing. Brilliant insight that leads into another brilliant insight you didn't see, into another brilliant insight you didn't see through a whole monologue. Another Nai Mojo, Naiji, will be impressed when another Naiji does that. But the Nijai will be impressed when you say something in your monologue, and they jump into some totally, what they think is like, I just went knee crazy, irrepressible, you can't catch me, ha ha ha. And you actually go, actually, that's on my map. It's here. And you'll actually always be able to do that. They're like, they think it's cool because you're not trying to trap them, but you're able to always actually make some sense to what you're talking about by what they present. And the more powerful Naiji is, and the bigger their model is, and the more experienced they are, like a comedian. Most badass, particularly Naiji comedians, they have a way of viewing the world that they have developed, and they use it to look at who's president, who's dating who in the news, and they just take that way of looking at things and find a way to be them, to maintain their stage presence, to maintain their way of looking at the world, but talk about any topic that the audience may find interesting. You can always do it, and still be you. Both Naiji and Naizi do that. They'll talk about all the political current events, all the pop culture current events. They'll talk about who's in the room, what they're wearing, the hecklers, who laughs their joke. And that's very V and need. They're customizing it to the moment while still being themselves. Genius, badass, cool. But you're right. You'll end up being stumped a lot, and you'll have to grow. A Ni Alpha will find like something asked to them, and they couldn't find a way to tie it into what they're about and still have it be relevant to the moment-to-moment ongoings. Work on it. Think on it. And next time that comes up in a random engagement, you'll know what to do. Does that make sense? And that's where Ni really helps you, because Ni tends to be more classic debating, where it's like, you go 5 minutes, I go 5 minutes, then we each get 2.5 minutes for counter argument, blah blah blah, like that. But Ni is sort of like, you mentioned ducks are the best bird for this reason. And they're like, do you know where I had a really good duck dinner? So they're not even addressing whether or not duck's the best bird to eat or anything. They just jumped over like, oh, I got drunk one time eating duck in a Peking house. And you're like, and you need to be able to like, okay, and shift into talking about that, but still make it related to what you want to be talking about. It can be done.
Can be done. It takes work, I think, though.
It does. And work, and this gets into also, again, tied all in, I guess, for tonight, is who you are spending your life with. You need, like, for me, one thing, I spent a lot of my life actually watching movies and shows, and I didn't have friends to hang out with, so I hung out with Nexi a lot, and we'd have conversations. It turned out that I was able to do that in real life. You actually have to have conversations. And as much as I like doing it in just, with Nexi and in my other spirit forms, whenever I do it with real life people and other kinds of worldly stuff, my inner head dialogue gets better. What you want is, you dialogue in your head, you improve your worldly game. Your worldly game gives you experiences, you go back in, your simulator's better. Boom, 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 boom. Then you're just good all the time.
Like, I mean, a lot of times, like, you'll realize, like, certain things about conversations you've had with, like, Nijai later, like, because you didn't quite get it quick enough, right? I mean, so, I mean, getting that will allow you to get those thoughts much more quickly. It'll improve that dialogue.
For sure, and that's things like, because a lot of times Nijai you'll seem like they're, like, super fast, and I've always said this, yes and no. Nijai are slow at remodeling. That's just the way Ni works, because when it remodels, it actually dissolves everything that you had as far as structure and then reforms from scratch. There's no freaking way to do that quickly. Now, if you're baking that correctly, like detachment and then reattach, detaching and reattaching takes a little time. And particularly if you're just going to like melt everything and restart, your house from scratch. But you can shapeshift lightning fast. And so if you actually have encountered something before and then have figured out what to do and to shapeshift for it, the next time it comes up, you can change from a form that was not about that into that the moment it comes up. As soon as you recognize, oh, when a person actually does some sort of threatening comment to me, I need to get into serious mode. I didn't know that last time, and I was slow. I then thought about that, updated myself, ran to the bunch about how to do better, worked on it. Now the next time it comes up, I was having a good time, laughing, joking.
You'll be able to jump right on it.
Boom, I can shift right on it, but as a Nijai, you have to have already developed that form to shift into. Developing new forms takes time. Shifting into forms already established can be done super fast.
Of course, yeah, because it's already there. You've already been there, you've already done that, you've already created that little spirit form thing, and so you can just jump right into it and just be like, here you go.
Sure. Another thing that happens a lot, and Sherlock Holmes kind of mentions this in the elementary one, this is the one that has the Nizai and Nizai, is that when he's dealing with the Nizai, he'll answer her question because she's his mentee, and therefore he needs to answer her question. But he'll often kind of preface it like, I think we're going off the trail here, but I'll answer your question, then we'll get back on the trail. But in answering her question, he often has to develop a new genius maneuver to answer it. And then once he does that, he's like, you know what? I can apply that over here. See, Ni will teach Ni to experiment on stuff that's not immediately applicable to solving the case. You mean? Like Ni can wait to apply something. It's got a very long-ranging view, but it's holding a key because you're like, in 10 years, this is going to go to a door. If Ni can see that, it can hold on to something for a very, very long time. That's not the issue. The issue is holding on to something that you don't know why you're holding on to it at all.
Yeah.
But a Nijai is like, I would really like to have such and such. And you're like, I do have the power as a wizard to get that and to keep it on my backpack, I would not go get that or keep it in my backpack except my Nijai other likes it. But very often, because the way Nezhez go together, or Nezhez, doing things that impress your other, if they don't have immediate value, they will. It's designed to bonus stack you. Everything the Ni does bonus stacks the Nai, Zhai to Ji, whatever. So at the moment, it just feels like you're Jiing to make the Zhai happy. Yes, but you got better at being Ji in the process. And somewhere down the adventure, what you did to make that Zhai happy is going to come up again, and now you know how to do it already. Does that make sense?
And it's going to make more sense to you as well.
It's going to make more sense to you, but you would have not probably gotten to that self-development aspect of yourself based on casework. Yeah. Casework was not demanding that you do that. Playtime that you really find irresistible to indulge in with your other, that's what put that on the board.
Yeah. I think I should probably start going to coffee shops.
They're fun. And there's lots of Nijai there. Aim for, so advice is the more independent you go to, the more you'll have Nezhez and La Nijai. And also more off hours, so like nighttime tends to have more Nijai as well. The more day shifty you get, and the more chain or like regular kind of cafe style established. They don't tend
like
to be
Starbucks is pretty generic.
Yeah, it's pretty generic. You'll find there they still show up, but the Vijai starts showing up in a lot more higher numbers, often outnumbering the Nijai.
Oh, really? Outnumbering?
At like Starbucks, yeah. Places like that.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I'd say most other places they're like fairly indie. It'll be more Nijai. And if it gets real indie, actually, it'll often be like the whole staff will be Nijai.
I guess just like the indiest place that you have in town.
The indiest coffee shop can get you. But indie coffee shops, usually in most cities you go to, there'll be different kind of like indie places that have like the artsy theater and different things for your community, and the coffee shops that tend to be around that suit that clientele. Also, good for you, Ben, is campuses on colleges tend to have very kind of like progressive cafes because they have a bunch of college students that frequent them.
Mm-hmm. Although having progressive, I mean, because it's on campus, you'll have the people that actually go there are students, so you'll find, I mean, like it'll be more generic the kinds of students you'll have there, because the jobs are like the jobs that the people work there. Like, I mean, the way it's set up is or the way that students think of it, it's like you get any job you can get. So it's you're less likely to find those specific mojos, but there's certain things you can do for sure. I mean, gloves, like for example, like that's.
But on the other hand, that is true, Ben. That's part of the equation. But another part of the equation is that Nijai, even in the most established places, are just exceptionally good. Both the Jez gatherers, both the Nijai and Nijai are just exceptionally good at hospitality industries. So it is true that they'll be taking from all kinds of college students, but they're just better at those jobs than most people. So they'll still tend to show.
Yeah, that does make sense. You're more likely to win at like in interviews and stuff.
Because they do this, they just have a real openness to them that just kind of puts
you. And that's exactly what they look like. Employers actually look for. I mean, I'm not saying like they know how to read or anything, but I mean they can definitely tell like certain things about person.
Friendly, and you can deal with a lot of interactions on a regular basis and keep that friendliness up and make a lot of people happy and smile. I mean, the Jets gatherers just really just rule at that. Cool. But no, you are right. There will be different demographics based on what's going on there. But overall, college campuses tend to be a good outlet. And in most places is that the Nezhez tend to be out and about more. The Nijai are a little more approachable, but both the Nezhez, Nijai and Naiji, they tend to be wandering around indie areas a lot more, kind of like they're same reason Nezhez actually do so much with artistic stuff as far as like creating it and also ingesting it. They find most normal life not very satisfying, so they try to find things to feed them. So obviously they create a lot of art and stuff, whatever. They tend to watch a lot of movies, TV, listen to a lot of music, read a lot of books, and as a part of that, good for us, they tend to actually go to the indiest places in whatever area you are and just hang out there and try to like drink that in and like live in that bubble. So upside for us is that's what we hunting.
Definitely. It's actually a funny story. Like when I was applying to McDonald's like over a year ago, like I think the person who was interviewing me, he was like the manager of the McDonald's. He was like a Vaiji or something. Like the signal that gave off to him was that I was very smart. And what they look for are people, oh, okay, so you can learn things quickly, you're usable, and we can teach you, and then you can get the job done well. I actually wasn't very good at that job at all because it was V and Xi related things I was working with basically all the time. So it was funny, I was much better at persuading them to hire me than I was at the actual job.
I find that too.
It's funny.
I can talk the game. I can make them like impressed, like, oh, like he seems like he's really willing to learn. Or
it's funny because that's actually the biggest hump to get over, like is getting them to hire you. After that, I mean, as long as you're somewhat competent, you can generally keep your job usually. So
nice. All right, is that a good place to sign off for the night?
Yeah, I feel pretty good about.
That was a good session. I felt like we did a lot there.
Yeah, totally.
I just feel after talking to like other Naiji, it feels, I don't know, kind of like I process stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because this stuff was on my mind too. Now we have to keep going. Okay.
Yeah, it's sort of like.
But it's sort of like when you're with like a Naiji and you're with a fellow directive, you're able to talk about your experiences and then have like someone explain those to you in a way that you are able to understand them better. Which can sometimes be a little bit of an issue when it comes to being with your other, I think, because sometimes they don't always articulate, they don't always tell you what you need, and you're just kind of like...
They take you to the rest of your story.
Yeah.
You know how to do your half. But another Naiji can help you figure out how to do your half right.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be like, oh, I know what's going on there, bro. I can tell you how, like, oh, this is what's really... Then they kind of explain it, kind of like, oh, so that's what's going on. Okay,
it's really important to mastering, like, just really mastering your powers, your 4 powers. But you need all 8, and you need
exactly.
You're truly
that's the benefit. Is like
right. So it's
other Naiji help you master your 4 powers, and which you definitely need, and then you just have to make sure you have your other there, so you don't actually become possessed. By just your 4 powers, and make that the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're really good at kind of like giving you certain things like to work towards.
Yeah, I mean you can see like entire perspectives, which is nice. That can help you out. Can teach you a lot.
And we talked a lot about their adaptive powers, but actually just a little bit here is like when they do get inspired enough to actually go down their peak pathway over to their modulation, they inspire you in a directive way that a directive doesn't actually do. Like for me, like for Nexi Z invites me all the time, but I like it because it's designed for me. And a couple things. One is it tends to be more playfully given to me through Ni and Jai. And that makes it like a game. And I think you guys know as Naiji, if there's a game that you think really is like super fun to play, that automatically means you're gonna be bad as fucking shit at it. For sure. I mean, like the 2 go as 1. If that's like the new like Marvels versus Avengers, fight game, and I like playing it, I'm gonna read that book on how to do the double combos, and I'm gonna be comboing everybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And there's gotta be like lots of like Naiji who like who go to like tournaments for competitive games and stuff. Like actually, I want to say something. My roommate, one of my roommates, he looks like a Naiji. He spends like all day like coaching people on how to coaching like high schoolers, like how to become like high ranked League of Legends players. And it's funny, and he gets like paid for it.
Nice. But I find that when given to me that way, there's 2 things that happen. One is I want to do it more than, for example, if a directive tells me to do something. Like there's just sort of like I want to show off. So it's not sort of like anything as far as like a rank or hierarchy. The Z from the Nijai is more like it'd be so cool if you could do this. They'll just say that. it'd be so cool if you could do that. That's our Nianjai. But when they do that, that Z means certain airline tickets. It means Mojo reading at a certain level. It means having such and such. I mean, they won't think that they'll come up next for them. But the first thing is like, oh, hey, baby, wouldn't it be so cool if you took your Mojo reading and did this and this, and over the summer you could show so-and-so, and they're just getting excited. When they do that, there'll be some Z to that. And you don't want to disappoint them. It's really interesting. Like, I really don't, when Nexie gets really excited about something, and she's like, ooh, 10,000. Like, Nexie got me to 10,000, which now I'm going to do more than that. But, like, at first she was like, that's 5 digits. That's so, like, she got, like, thought that'd be so cool, and like, that got me to do it. Exactly, just keep you going. It's like, okay. Where someone else was to push on me like that, I think that I may be more resistant. But in a desire to show off for my muse goddess, pretty much, if I can do it, if I can put that on the board, that's getting put on the board. And then that's the interesting thing is often, because it's Z, though, it's rigorous in a way that I would not challenge myself otherwise. But like, this is kind of a classic scenario that will happen, is I'll be flying my dragon around, and Nexie's like, your dragon's so cool, it can do all these cool things in my spirit force or whatever. And I'm like, yeah. And then her Z will say something about some town she visits. And in there's a person, a place, a situation, whatever, and she's like, your dragon abilities could totally change that to this new level. And it could. She has a very good understanding, a profoundly accurate and appreciative understanding, and demanding, challenging understanding of what I can pull off. And when her Nianjai is wandering around some, bazaar in some foreign land, and she notes, if my baby brought his Truthfire to like a top level, he could actually remake that whole pyramid. It would be really awesome. We could go have awesome pyramid sex, and he said he wanted to do that. So I'm out there flying around, with my dragon and my fairies, like, hey, you want to have exotic pyramid interdimensional sex? I'm like, I want to have pyramid interdimensional sex. And then she's like, we can totally have it. You just got to go Truthfire this village and hit a high score. I was like, okay, consider the high score done. That's going to happen tonight.
That's our anniversary thing.
Yeah. Interdimensional sex pyramid coming up. Yeah, so Naiji's awesome, but it won't give you that. Oh, goodness. And
you might even get into like an argument about like what about what you should. I mean, like, yeah.
We kind of started off like a little bit like fired up on this one, but I think I kind of went into like a more just easier kind of dialogue.
And that's what it has to be as an IG. When you set things correctly on the right foot, it allows you then to just expand and go wherever because the essentials have been put in proper place. I'll sign off with this is just saying that also the Vi as well is the Nai in general chafes against Vi. They're the most opposite as far as your source power, and we generally will avoid going a specific way. In fact, if people try to put a specific way on us, we'll hit the target in every freaking way you can think of except for that specific way you demanded of us. We do not like actually hitting specific demand targets. But sometimes you need to, and the one that'll get you to do it is your other. Because your other is like, for example, like the way I learned that my Daryu early on when I was saving my other, is she would be presented in scenarios where she needs to be saved, and as a point of doing that, I have to accomplish some Z challenge. And then there's that point where everything tries to get me to let go of the rope. Everything tries to get me to take a different road. And I'm not supposed to shapeshift except to be more implacable going forward on this exact route. Holding an exact route when everything's screaming at you to shapeshift or to bail. And you're like, nope, I'm going to stay in this exact form all the way in until I dot that I. That's hard to do, especially if you're taking damage. But for your other, you'll do it because there's a certain kind of damage you take that are kind of like proudly worn war scars. If you have an other that thinks that that scar you got saving her village is sexy, you're like, give me that scar. I'll take that scar, doing the right thing, and I'll wear it proudly. But that's foreign to us because normally, like, I don't like the world to touch me, so I'll shapeshift or I'll ghost walk out of it. And like Superpolar Vi, like, you can't shapeshift and you cannot ghost walk. You have to be here in an exact form and hold an exact course. So gnarly, but you'll be your most powerful. A dragon, its top form, is now holding a course that's flying. And that's the course they have to do, no matter what. And then things are telling them to bail, but they can't. Their other says you can't. You know what you do? You kind of shapeshift into just a more intense version of the form you already are, because you cannot come off the line. Your other is requiring you to stay on point. You know what you do? This is badass. You actually evolve and quasi-death en route, because you actually can't come off. You cannot come off that trajectory that you're being given. And so you can't be dissatisfied. You're able to endure probably your greatest pain in order to actually maintain a specific route that you wouldn't otherwise do. And if you can do it for the right reasons, your other is that, you can pull off all your great feats. Because always when you, like, you know, all the great artists, you know, Michelangelo doing different, you know, churches or whatever, like, there comes a point where, can't I cut corners? To be an artistic genius for all times? No. Now, normal details are crap, and you give those out to lesser artists to fill in the work for you that you want to do. But some stuff you must do by hand. You're the only hand good enough, and you got to paint in every single one, or it's half-assed. Got to stay on it. And your other will give you what you need for that, because your other will keep kissing you with that kind of, like, you know, muse love while you're in pain. It's actually a lot of Naiji who are really badass. They do well in MMA. You can see it. They're getting all busted up. They're like in a hero glow state. Clearly there are others telling them that the sexiest thing ever is them walking forward. They're getting cut up, they're looking ugly, their body's getting hurt, but you can see their eyes. Something higher is telling them, you're a rock god, keep going forward. Another Naiji can't give it to Naiji. Only Nijai can give you that, you are a rock god feeling. And that's Apex Naiji when you're in that mode.
Yeah, that makes me think about a lot of different projects that I kind of like get into, and then I'm like, you just kind of like do them, and then you kind of like become really good at them, become addicted to them in a kind of way, and you want to just keep becoming more and more better. Like when I was a little bit more younger, I would play video games, and it was really just for the love of the game, and like I would notice, like, oh wow, look, I can become really cool if I can get this, I can do this one move, but in order to get that move, I need to be able to, you know, like, earn that, and I need to get a certain amount of such and such in order to get there, and then, you know, it's just like it edges you want to keep going more. And then sometimes I remember one time there's certain things in certain games. It's like the person that created the game was like, I'm gonna mess with the gamer, and I'm gonna. It's something that they put in, like, only a truly person who like really loves this game will go this place.
Yeah.
To really like, and I'm like, I'm looking at that, I'm like, I gotta get that.
Yeah.
That's like so hard to do, but I gotta get that. And when I do, then it's gonna just be like, you know, like I have the right to like be like, I did that, you know, I did that thing, and you know, like, and then it sounds impressive, and then it sounds really cool when you say it because you actually did that, and say you have the confidence to say that instead of cutting corners. When someone cuts corners, you can tell by the way that they speak that there's something, you know, not completely like they did that, but they kind of feel they don't look like someone who did that.
Yep.
Because they know that they didn't actually do the right thing.
I feel that all the time, and Nexi tells me that all the time when we get like pushback from people who are acting like we're lesser when they are. It's like, no, I'm doing Mojo reading with 12,000 samples. I'm purifying myself on like, and she kind of lists out like, no, those are feats on the board. They're not doing that because it's too hard, and that's why they don't get it, because they don't deserve it. You gotta earn it. Gotta earn it.
But it feels really good when you do earn it.
It feels the best. When your other tells you, well, a job well done, you're like, oh man, it's the best.
There's nothing better than that feeling, like when you're tired and you're like beaten down, but you're on top. You know, you did it. You're like Rocky after like a big fight and you won, and you're like, ah.
That's when the Nija other really can egg the Naiji on, especially in times of like a lot of stress and ordeal, is You are a genius. That's Need and I love you. Jai to Ji. You can do this. Z. You've got this. I know you can do this. And then Vi. If you pull this off, no matter how beat up you are, how tired you are, that's on the board forever, and they can't ever take that away from you, baby. That feat was done. If you die right now, you will always have that. If you never do another thing in your life again, you will always have that. That's permanent. In a good way. If you pull this off, and my Z says you can, that'll go in your permanent record, and we'll always have that together. You're like, okay, baby, I'm getting it. Yeah. Artie, I really do have to get going because I have to do some stuff with Jailene tonight too for beats. But this was awesome. Really, really awesome, guys.
Yeah, and it did a full circle.
Really fun. Yeah,
pathway too. Like we went talked about Naiji, then all the way to Vi.
That's true. Yeah.
Very true. It's cool. It was a complete story. Awesome.
Excellent.
And that actually is totally relevant because that's what we talked about the entire time. So
it is. Yeah. It is, and it is actually the most proper way to answer that person's question. If you're going to compare Naiji, double Naiji partners to Nijez partners, you have to talk about storyline because that's where you see how everything works or doesn't work.
Yeah, although it was almost like we weren't really doing this to answer their question.
No,
because
we weren't.
It kind of became its own thing.
But she can be inspired. It doesn't matter where inspiration comes from. Like, I'll take it.
That person probably isn't still watching this video now, or maybe they are. I don't know. You have to be open-minded here.
But like I said, we grew. We had a good time. We grew. I felt like we expanded our game. So cool. Yeah. It was worth doing that for sure. All right, everyone. Have a great night. And I will see you all on Sunday.
Oh, yeah. See you on Sunday.
Yes. See you on Sunday. And this
some good stuff for you guys.
Scorpion.
Oh, and broadcast?